Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's UC Merced Educator Tour specializing on transfers. My name is Adam. I'm the events coordinator here at the University of California, Merced, joined by several of my colleagues in the background. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping procedures. We do have the ability to answer your questions both live and through the Q&A tool. To submit your questions, that's located at the bottom center portion of the screen. To adjust your volume, that is located in the bottom left-hand portion of your screen. We will unfortunately be unable to answer any questions that are submitted through the chat tool, so please ask any of your questions through the Q&A tool, and then we will respond to those either at the end of today's presentation, or we will also answer those live throughout. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to my colleague, Sheila. Sheila, take it away.
Thanks, Adam. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the second session of our Educator Tour program. So today's presentation, we'll be talking about the admissions process for transfer. So our presentation is inside UC Merced Admissions for community college counselors. So my name is Sheila Zhang, and I'm the Senior Admissions Transfer Advisor for the Office of Admissions at UC Merced. I will be your presenter today. So just a reminder, you can put your questions in the Q&A. We'll try our best to answer them throughout the presentation. And we'll also try to save some time for the end for any questions if you have any. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is just an overview of the topics that we're going to cover for today's presentation. We'll first get started with transfer admissions, where we will talk a little bit about the requirements and different pathways that we have available for transfer students here at UC Merced. After that, we will move to the transfer application review process, where we talk a little bit more about what we are looking for when we are evaluating transfer applications. And then we will move forward to the next steps for students, where we'll talk a little bit more about, what the next steps look like for students who've been admitted and what they can do after they submit their application. And then with that, we'll close off with a Q&A or questions if we have any time. And we're going to first talk about transfer admissions. So who is a transfer applicant? We're starting off first with the definition of what the UC considers as a transfer student. So a transfer applicant is a student who has enrolled in a fall, winter, or spring term at a college or university after high school graduation. Please note that the summer term after high school graduation is not listed here. So if you do have any high school students that you are working with who have taken summer courses at the community college, they're not yet considered a transfer student. So once again, students are considered transfer if they complete a fall, winter, or spring term right after high school graduation. So that is our definition of who is a transfer applicant. All right, so now we're going to talk about the different, opportunities that transfer students have to transfer to our campus. The first opportunity that we're going to talk about is called the early transfer opportunity. And this is actually something new that we've launched last spring to, allow for different pathways for transfer students. So currently, UC Merced is the only University of California campus that offers an undeclared transfer option to students, which means that, if you were eligible out of high school, you can actually transfer sooner to UC Merced if you like. So the different pathways that are offered for the early transfer opportunity program is the undeclared pathway with 15 units or less, the undeclared pathway with 16 to 29 units, and then the major pathway. So each of these pathways do have different requirements that students have to meet. And we'll go ahead and take a look at these different requirements on the next slide. All right, so here's a breakdown of the requirements. And of course, these requirements are also listed on our website. So at any time, if you want to revisit these requirements, you can always look up early transfer opportunity, UC Merced, or you just Google it, or send us an email and we can send you these requirements. So for students who are interested in pursuing the early transfer opportunity pathway for the different options, there are different requirements. So the first one we're going to talk about is the undeclared pathway with 15 units or less. For students who are wanting to transfer undeclared with 15 units or less, They must have completed at least 15 UC transferable semester units or less. They must have a minimum 2.0 GPA, and this is a UC transferable GPA as well. For non-resident students, it's a minimum of a 2.8 GPA. Students who also want to come in as undeclared with 15 units or less will need to have met the UC high school eligibility requirements. So that's your 3.0 GPA, the A through G courses, any exams for the students. And then from there on, if the student has 16 to 29 units, they can still transfer as undeclared. So for undeclared pathway with 16 to 29 units, students must have between 16 to 29 UC transferable semester units completed. They must also have a minimum 2.5 UC transferable GPA. Once again, for non-residents, it's a 2.8 UC transferable GPA. Same with the 15 units pathway, the student has to meet UC high school eligibility requirements. So for both undeclared pathways, the student has to have a certain number of units and they have to have a certain GPA as well as meeting the high school requirements. Next, we're going to move to the major pathway. So for the major pathway, what's important about this one though is that the students must have completed the required major preparation requirements for that major. So if the student is coming in as a bio major, they have to complete like their bio major prep, which is usually general biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, calculus. If they're coming in as a psychology major, this is a general psych course and usually a statistics course. So for those looking to transfer before the 60 semester into a major pathway, they will definitely want to make sure that they are checking the required major preparation because this is key. On top of having completed required major preparation, students who want to transfer for the major pathway must also have completed or met the high school eligibility requirements. So what's key about the early transfer opportunity pathways for transfer students is that they must have met the UC high school eligibility requirements. That's key. And then after that, depending on where the students' units are at, or if they want to come in as undeclared or into a major, that will pretty much dictate kind of like the pathways that they can take. All right. So this is just a little bit about our early transfer opportunity pathways for transfer students. If you do have transfer students who are looking into any of these pathways who might have questions, or if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to work with you and your students, as each transfer student is a different case. So please feel free to reach out to our office if you do have more questions or you have students who might be a good fit for the early transfer opportunity. All right, next we're going to move into the junior level transfer requirements. And this is what most transfer students traditionally transfer into as. So students who are interested in coming in as a junior level transfer must meet the following requirements to be considered for admissions at a UC campus. So the first requirement is that the students must have 60 semester or 90 quarter units of UC transferable coursework. The next requirement is a minimum 2.4 UC transferable GPA. And then we have what's known as the UC 7 course pattern, which consists of 2 transferable English courses, 1 transferable math course, and then 4 additional transferable courses from at least 2 of the following subject areas, which are listed here. So as arts and humanities, behavioral and social sciences, and then physical and biological sciences. Last but not least, students who are coming in as a junior level transfer should also complete required major preparation for their major. What's important to note is that the requirements listed here are just the minimum requirements to be considered for a junior level transfer. There are also selection and major preparation requirements that a student must meet. So for example, this is the minimum GPA 2.4, but some students might have to meet a higher GPA for their major. So for students who are looking to apply into different UC campuses, definitely check out each campus's website, because students should definitely make sure that they are meeting the major and the selection factors. So that could be any additional courses, any GPA requirements. Some majors also have supplemental application requirements, usually for like the art majors, they have to submit a portfolio. So these are just the minimum requirements, once again, to be considered at UC. There are also the major preparation requirements that vary by campus and by major that students should also make sure that they're taking note of. All right, so speaking of selection factors, here are UC Merced selection factors. So of course, when we are looking at, transfer applicants, a lot of the primary evaluation is done on the student's academics. So making sure that they're meeting that minimum requirement and the major preparation. On top of that, we're also looking at these different selection factors, right? So major preparation, GPA, courses that have been completed or are planned and in progress. Positive grade trends, we do take note of that as well. We do definitely notice positive grade trends when we are evaluating applications for transfer students as well. And then additional selection factors would be special talents, achievements and awards, aptitude to excel in academics framed by life experiences, and then participation in educational preparation programs. And educational preparation programs can be anything from Puente to Mesa to any of the UC transfer preparation programs that a student may be involved in. All right, just a few COVID-19 changes to UC admissions policy. So currently, we are allowing pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grading for spring 2020, summer 2020, and fall 2020. Please note that any courses taken with a pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grading during these specific terms will not count towards UC's limitation of 14 semester and 21 quarter transferable units. So just a note that, the minimum requirements state that students must have at least 60 semester or 90 quarter units of UC transferable credit, 14 semester or 21 quarter transferable units of those coursework cannot exceed the pass, no pass. But if a student is opting for this pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grading during these specific terms, it won't be counted toward that limitation. In addition, UC Merced will also accept major preparation completed during these terms with a pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grading for all majors. So for example, some of our majors do require students to have specific letter grades for courses. One example is the biology major, which requires that students complete general biology with lab with a letter grade of B or better. Currently for these semesters, we are not requiring that letter grade. So if a student opts to take pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grading for any of their major prep during these semesters, we will accept the pass, no pass, credit, no credit grading. Some of you may be wondering about, the future terms or this current term, so spring 2021 or summer. Currently, we don't have an update for that, and we hope to be able to provide you an update soon. But currently, as of right now, pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grading only applies to these specific terms that are listed here. Another COVID-19 update specifically for UC Merced is that the second semester of organic chemistry requirements that we usually require for biological science majors to have has been waived for fall 2021 and spring 2022. So once again, students who are interested in transferring for biology have to complete 2 semesters of organic chemistry. So with this change, we're basically waiving the organic chemistry, the second semester organic chemistry requirement for biology majors for fall 2021 and spring 2022. And currently, it's only being waived for these specific terms that are listed here. So these are just some COVID-19 changes that have been made to the UC admissions policy. All right, so with that, we kind of covered a little bit about the admission requirements, and we're actually going to get started with a few case studies that we have. And as we're going through the case study, Adam will actually pull up the poll, which will allow you to answer the questions on the poll. So, all right, so case study 1, this is what the student's profile looks like. So for this student, and this is not specific to any specific community college, so it's more general. So for fall 2020, this student has completed English 1, which is reading and composition. It's 3 units, the student received a C grade and the course is UC transferable and it meets the UC English area. The student also has an art history, Western art history course, 3 units, C grade, also transferable and meets the humanities and arts area. Spring 2021, the student is currently in progress with a Library 22, Library Applications 1 unit course. It's in progress and it's non-transferable and currently doesn't fall in the UC area. The student also has a Business 1 or Introduction to Business course, 3 units in progress, transferable, and does not currently fall within the UC area. So overall, the student has a total UC transferable units of 9 semester units. Their UC transferable GPA is a 2.0. And additional information that we have for this student is that they are missing 1 A through G course in English, but they meet all other UC high school requirements. So the question for this is this student eligible to apply to UC Merced as an early transfer applicant? And Adam has the poll up, so please feel free to answer, and we'll go over this in the next slide. All right, so I think the majority of everyone has answered, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide so we can go over the answer for this case study. All right, so for this case study, is this student eligible to apply to UC Merced as an early transfer applicant? The answer is actually yes. The reason for that is the student is eligible to apply to UC Merced as an early transfer applicant for the undeclared pathway with 15 units or less, because the student has completed less than 15 units. The student has also remedied the A through G deficiency in the 1 English course through completion of the English 1 course, which is a UC English and transferable course. And the student has a minimum 2.0 UC transferable GPA. So one thing to note about the undeclared pathway or the early transfer opportunity pathways for transfer students is that if any of the students that you are working with are deficient in A through G courses, they can actually make up for these deficiencies by taking UC transferable courses in those specific areas. So if it's like an art course that they were missing or a history course, they can actually remedy these deficiencies by taking a UC transferable course at the community college. So for any early transfer opportunity students who you might be working with who is missing an A through G requirement, they can always take the UC transferable equivalent of that course or a UC transferable course in that specific subject area for the course that they are missing. So for this student, they would actually be eligible just because, you know, they are meeting the unit requirement, the GPA requirement. And although they are missing the 1 A through G course in English, they have completed that by or validated that by completing the English 1 reading and composition course at the community college. All right, good one. All right, so our next case study, we have a second case study, and we'll also have a poll on this as well. So for this case study, we have, it looks a little bit different from the first one, but it's a different student case. So for the student profile, they are a materials science and engineering major. They have a 2.8 UC transferable GPA. They completed the UC 7 course pattern. They completed 50 semester units from a California community college, and it's not listed here, but these 50 semester units are UC transferable. And they're, you know, in terms of transferring to UC Merced, here is how they've completed the major preparation for their major. So we can see here for the required major preparation that the student has completed General Chemistry 1, Calculus 1, Calculus 2, Calculus 3. They have not yet completed linear algebra, differential equations, calculus-based physics 1, and calculus-based physics 2. So for the required major preparation, they're missing 3 courses currently. For recommended, so once again, these are recommended. They're not required, just recommended. For recommended major preparation, the student has a general biology with lab or environmental science course, and they have introduction to materials. For recommended, they haven't completed the statics and dynamics, probability and statistics. And for this one, we didn't list it, but it's pretty much a computer science course. So this is the student profile. And the question for this one is, should this student apply as an early transfer or a junior level transfer applicant? And the poll is up, so we'll give everyone a minute or so to answer. All right, so I think the majority of everyone has answered the poll. So it looks like it's kind of split across. So we have 40% answered early transfer, 30% for junior level, and then 30% unsure, which is perfectly fine. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide for the answer. All right. So for this case, we do encourage that the student apply to UC Merced as a junior level transfer applicant for the materials, science, and engineering major. The reason for that is the student does not meet the criteria for early transfer undeclared options because of unit. So once again, I know it's kind of hard because we don't have the slide to reference, and we'll probably put that on for the next time we do this. But for the early transfer undeclared option, students have to have, for the first month, students have to have less than 15 units, 15 semester units of UC transferable credit. And then the other undeclared option is 16 to 29 units. So in terms of the early transfer undeclared option for UC Merced, this student wouldn't meet that pathway only because they've exceeded that unit count for the undeclared option. Now for the early transfer major option, for this student, so once again, remember that the major option requires students to have completed the required major preparation. For this student, they're actually missing 3 courses in the required major preparation section. So for this student, they're missing linear algebra and differential equations, and both of the calculus-based physics courses. So for this student, because they are missing those courses, they have to take them. And by the time they take them, they're going to reach that junior level status, because each course will be around 4 to 5 units, depending on the community college. So after completion of these 3 major preparation courses, the student will have met the unit count that's going to make them meet the junior level status. So by completing major prep, they're going to be considered junior level just because of the units. So for this student, we would actually encourage them to apply as a junior level transfer applicant. Some of you did answer early transfer. So in very, very rare cases, if a student who has this, who has this kind of a record and has been doing well in their major prep course applies as a early transfer, what we will do is we will review their application. And this is in very, very rare cases where if the student is a very good student with outstanding grades and very good performance in their major preparation, we may forward them for additional review. However, that's just in very rare cases. If you find that, you know, you have a student who meets the early transfer major requirements, but maybe they're just, you know, missing 1 major preparation course, but everything else, please feel free to reach out to us. You know, the requirements do state that they need to have major prep completed, but if it's a really, really good student and you feel that, you know, they would be, you know, a good case for us to work with, you can definitely reach out to us. But for this specific, you know, case, we would encourage that the student apply as a junior level transfer applicant. But, you know, every case is different. So if you do have questions or you're just not too sure, you know, definitely reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to work with you and this student. All right. So, okay, so that's admissions. So hopefully that gave you kind of like a brief overview of the admission requirements, the early transfer pathways for students that we have here at UC Merced. And once again, if you do have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us. Now we're going to move forward and talk about the transfer application review process and what that looks like. So what we have here is the admissions timeline. And it also shows our recruitment cycle. So this is pretty much a visual of what it kind of looks like for us throughout the year. So we started this timeline with August 1. So in August 1, the UC application actually opens for the fall. So what that means is that students can actually get started on their application. If they want to start filling out the application, they can as well, or create the application. August is when they can. August is also when we start kind of like our recruitment season as well. September 1 is when the fall tag opens for participating UC campuses. So there are only 6 campuses that participate in the tag, and you're more than welcome to put in the Q&A if you know what those 6 participating campuses are. But there are only 6 UC campuses that currently participate in the tag. So that's when the tag application opens for the fall. October 1 is the filing period for FAFSA, or the California Dream Act, and California grant, or the Cal Grant. So for students who are looking to apply for financial aid, that is when the filing period opens. November 1 through 30 is the fall admission application filing period. So for students who are looking to transfer for a fall term, that is when they would want to start submitting their application. Through the months of December, January, and February, that is when our office is doing our application reviews. So our office is, currently evaluating applications right now. So from December through February, that is application review for our office. It's also verification for spring. So for the students who are applying for, the spring term, that's when we'll be doing verification. And winter is also eligibility checks and additional review for any students. March 2nd is the financial aid verification form deadline, and that's also when students will want to be submitting their financial aid as well. From March through April, that's when we are releasing admission decisions. So for transfer students, usually, beginning or mid-March is when we start releasing these decisions, and all students should have a decision, towards, the end of April. If it's May and a student hasn't received their admission decision, please have them reach out to us. At the same time as we are releasing decisions from March through May, April through May is when we are hosting our yield events for admitted students. So that's when we're that's usually the time when we're out there with, our admit receptions, our next steps workshops. So April through May is yield events for admitted students. May 1 is when the spring tag opens for UC Merced. So if you have a student who's interested in tagging or transferring to UC Merced for the spring, May 1 is when the spring tag opens for UC Merced. June 1 is the SIR deadline for admitted transfer students for fall. So for students who are applying for a fall term, June 1 is when they want to submit their SIR deadline. And then July 1st is when the spring application opens for UC Merced. It's also when we start releasing our decisions for the spring as well. So this is just pretty much an overview for the admissions timeline. All right, so with the admissions timeline, and the evaluation process, some of you might be wondering, like, okay, so what does that look like for you all, or what do you look for when you're evaluating the application? So we kind of went over the requirements a little bit, but for us, when we do our evaluation process here for transfer applicants, the primary evaluation is done on the academics, right? So the coursework. So we first review our applications for minimum transfer requirements. So before we move on with anything else in the application, we definitely look to see if the student is meeting the minimum requirements. They have to meet the minimum requirements for us to move forward. So minimum requirements are the UC7 course pattern. So that's your 2 English, 1 math, 4 transferable elective courses. They must have a minimum 2.4 UC transferable GPA. And once again, this is just the minimum GPA. And then after that, we will look to see that they have the 60 semester or 90 core UC transferable units. This here is for junior level transfer applicants, but of course, as we look at the early transfer students, we'll also look to see that they're meeting those unit requirements where applicable for the level that they are applying for. So first and foremost, when we start our evaluation process, we're really looking to see if the student has met the minimum transfer requirements. If the student has met the minimum transfer requirements, we will then screen the application for major preparation. So we'll look at required major preparation. Does this student have the required courses with the grades that are needed or the GPA that is needed for their major? Along with these required major preparation requirements or selection, we will then also look for recommended major preparation. Now, once again, it's always important that the student has required major preparation. Any recommended major preparation that they do complete on top of the required ones are great. It makes the student more selective and more competitive. However, it's really important that they do have the required courses. So our evaluation process is first we start with the minimum transfer requirements, and then we move on to the major preparation selection requirements to make sure that the student is meeting those specific requirements for their major. All right, so along with the coursework and their academics, we also take a look at different aspects of the application. We also look at the academic history, right? One thing to note when we are, reviewing the applications is it's really important for students to report all courses and grades as shown on official transcripts. Some students might feel that, their non-transferable courses are not important to put on, but we really want students to input everything. So I always tell students, it doesn't matter if it's non-transferable, you want it to match your application. I mean, not your application, your transcripts. So when we are reviewing your application, if your courses don't match the transcript, it gives us a really big question mark, like, why did you leave this out? Or why did you not report it? So always make sure that, if you are working with a student who's inputting in their grades, report all courses and grades as it shows on an unofficial transcripts. The one thing to note about this too is you might have students who have international records or out-of-state records who might, be wondering about how to report their courses and grades. If you are working with international students or any students with international records, please have them put their grades and their courses as how it shows on their transcript. A lot of the times we get students who ask us if they should translate their grades or, they got their transcripts translated and now the 1.5 is showing as an A grade. However, we don't actually take those translated grades. So if you do have students who have international records, please have them report all their courses and grades as how it shows on their international transcripts. Our international evaluators will then determine whether those courses are transferable and what the actual grade is based on that. So once again, just remind students to report all courses and grades as shown on their unofficial transcripts. We also take a really, thorough look at the gaps in education for students who have multiple gaps in education. And for us, we want students to provide details and specific dates. It's really hard when we're going through the application and you have a student who has multiple gaps or a very long period of gaps. And they put like, they were just working, like they would just put work, or I was working. We want more details and we want specific dates because for us, it's really important that the student did not enroll or complete courses anywhere. So for gaps in education, when we're looking at this, if you are working with a student who has questions about their gaps, please let them know to provide as much details and specific dates about their gaps in education. We really just want to know that, they were definitely taking a gap and they weren't enrolled in any courses or any institutions anywhere. One thing to also note too is course and unit limitations. So for example, the PE activity courses or specific STEM course sequences, right? It's also important, as we're looking at this, when we're reviewing applications that, these limitations are applied, but also when we're working with students out there in the field that they're aware that there are unit limitations. We do get questions sometimes from students who are not aware that they didn't meet the unit requirements because they didn't know that there were limitations to certain courses. So that's another thing to note too for academic history is if you are working with any student, just remind them that there are limitations to specific courses, and these limitations can actually be found on assist. So if a student is not too sure, you can always point them to assist. If they pull up the UC transferable course list for the community college, it will tell them which courses are limited and how many units they can get for certain courses. All right, so that's the academic history part. We also look at the extracurricular activities and personal insight questions. And for extracurricular activities and personal insight questions, where we're also looking to see if the student provided any information regarding their gaps in education. We do find that sometimes students will put, information that is relevant to the gap. So including any employment history is good too. So once again, I gave the example of, when a student takes a really long gap, sometimes they'll just put that I was working, or they'll just put work. Sometimes we will look at that employment history part on the extracurricular activity section to see if anything was indicated. So usually what we do is the student, we note that the student has a gap. They mentioned that they were working. We'll scroll down the application. We'll look at their employment history or the extracurricular activities. If the student indicates that they were actually really working during the time that they put down on their gap, we can easily clear that gap for the student. But if the student doesn't list down their employment history, we'll most times, we'll just have to send the student an email to clarify if they were really taking a gap or not, or were really working and not enrolled anywhere. We also want students to list all relevant extracurricular activities and report any participation in educational preparation programs. So programs such as MESA, Transfer Applicant, Puente, Umoja, any educational preparation programs that a student was part of, we definitely encourage them to report as well. And then last but not least, utilizing the additional information section. Students should be able to use the application to share information regarding, limited course offerings. We understand that not all courses are offered or articulated at certain community college. So definitely use that additional information section to share this information with us. I always encourage students as well too to share anything that they feel might be relevant for their application or relevant for us to know as they are completing their application. So definitely utilize the additional information to share more information or anything that was not provided in the application. All right, so that's our evaluation process. And now we're going to move on to the next steps section. All right, so our next steps timeline. What does the enrollment process looks like? So we shared the admissions timeline with, when we start releasing decisions and our yield events. So our enrollment process begins in June for transfer students. So in June, that's when the SIR deadline is for transfer student, as well as the statement of legal residency, or SLR for short. That's also, at UC Merced, when students would have to also complete their placement exams. So placement exams will vary, and it doesn't apply to all students. And then that's also when students would register for orientation as well. Just to note, a student can actually register for orientation sooner in April if they have their admission decision, but June is the deadline for when they should be registering for orientation. That's also when we start our appeals decision release. And then through the months of June and July, that's when students should be submitting required documentations. They will be receiving information on how to register for courses here at UC Merced, any housing information, and that's also when students would be attending their orientation sessions. In the month of July, that's when we begin our verification process. That's also when students attend their orientation as well. So once again, June, July, different orientation dates. July is also when students would want to submit their official transcripts and test scores deadline. So any official transcripts, any AP exams that the student reported in their application, these should be sent by the July deadline. August is, the time when students should be, paying for their tuition and fees. We also have a health insurance waiver for students, and that's when the deadline is too. So for students who have their own health insurance or want to utilize a health insurance plan that they've already been covered in and want to waive that, that's also the time when they would submit that waiver. That's also August is also when move-in day begins for students, and August is also when instruction begins for UC Merced. So this is just a timeline of what it looks like for the next steps in the enrollment process for us here at UC Merced. All right, so now we're going to move to our UC Merced Connect portal. Some of you might be familiar with our old portal, which was My UC Merced. We've actually moved to a new platform, Connect. It's Connect UC Merced. So connect.ucmerced.edu. And it's really different, and I actually like this layout because it's actually, you know, it's just, there's a lot of visuals, and it's definitely like easy to navigate. And there's icons, and I think the icons are cool. So we actually now are on Connect, not My UC Merced anymore, but Connect. And Connect is the portal where students will want to log in to check for, you know, their admission decisions. So any communications, any admission decisions, they can actually check on their Connect portal. And students should be receiving an email from us that will give them instructions on how to you know, establish the Connect portal, how to log in, how to find their username and set their password. So this is the Connect portal. All right, and then we do have our admitted events and activities website for admitted students. So if you do have admitted students, you know, who are wondering about what the next steps to UC Merced are, or who would like more information, you can definitely point them to our admitted events page. So it's admitted.ucmerced.edu. With this page, students have the opportunity to kind of like see what kind of events and webinars that we have going on for students. There's also next steps too, which outlines, you know, the different steps throughout, you know, receiving your admission decision to making sure that you submit your statement of intent to register and any other documents. So this website actually hosts a really great amount of resource for admitted students to just really navigate what it really looks like once you receive your admission decision. So once again, it's admitted.ucmerced.edu. And if you have any students who've been admitted, have questions, definitely point them this way to our website. And then we spoke a little bit about the Connect portal, but when the students log in, this is what their checklist looks like. So the checklist will have the requirements that are listed for the student, the documentations, or anything that's required of them to complete or turn in. So when they log into their Connect portal, this is the checklist, and you'll see here on this screenshot as well that the requirements will be listed. If it hasn't been met or it's unsatisfied, the status will show as unsatisfied. It will also let the student know as well too which office is requesting for those specific documentations and the deadlines as well. And if the student has more questions, they can contact the office that's requesting for this requirement, or they can also click. As you can tell in the screenshot, it's actually a clickable link, so they can actually click for more information on what that specific requirement is. Just a note for required transcripts, you know, transcripts can be sent electronically and delivered via an approved vendor. So we do have different vendors that are approved for sending transcripts electronically. Students can also deliver, you know, their official transcripts via postal service directly to our office. And then they can also deliver by themselves, you know, the official transcripts. One thing to note is for transcripts to be official, they have to be sealed and unopened in the envelope that was received. So if a student opened official transcripts and then put them in a different envelope to send to us, it's no longer official. So for the transcripts to be considered official, they have to be sealed in the original envelope and not opened or anything. So just a note. And then once again, the official transcript deadline is in July, and all, you know, documentations or transcripts can be sent to our office with our address listed here. So we have it listed as UC Merced Office of Admissions, 5200 North Lake Road, Merced, California, and zip code is 95343-5603. It's kind of long, but I think you could just put 95343 too, or you can look it up. All right, and then other admissions options. So it's always great when a student receives their admission decision, right, and they've been admitted. But we know that, you know, for some students, you know, that might not be the case. And we definitely want to, you know, assist them with making sure that, you know, they can get to our campus. So for students who maybe were denied and want to appeal their denied decision, they do have the opportunities to submit the appeal. So the appeal process for students, we have a website. didn't list it here. I should have listed here, but it's all right. You can just look up UC Merced appeal process. So for admission decision appeal process, there's a May 15th appeal deadline. So if a student received, their decision and they weren't too happy with their decision, they can definitely submit an appeal. For students who are submitting an appeal, they should have new and compelling information that was not already included in their application. So we do look for new and compelling information that was not in the application. Also, please note that appeals are not reviewed until after the appeal deadline. So a student could submit their appeal in April, but just note that, they're not reviewed until the May 15th appeal deadline. And then appeal decisions may not be available until after June 1. So from May through June, it's quite a process, and I understand sometimes students submit their appeals a little bit sooner. So just remember, if you do have any students who did submit an appeal, that we don't start our review until after the deadline, and it could be June or after June when they receive their appeal decision. Also, as well, for students who may have received a denied decision, we do have spring enrollment. So UC Merced is open both fall and spring. Sometimes a student could have been denied because they were missing, one major prep, or they were missing a certain number of units. What's really great about the fall and spring enrollment opportunities is that students can actually use that next upcoming semester to make up those requirements. So if a student was denied, definitely reach out to us and our transfer advisors. We're definitely more than happy to walk over why the student was, denied, and make any recommendations to what they can do to increase their chances of getting to our campus for the next term. All right, and then I think we're coming towards the end here. So this COVID-19 updates for fall 2021 for the UC Merced campus is that we are planning to return to primarily in-person instruction starting fall 2021. Our campus is still working on what that might look like. And if you do have any questions about COVID-19 or UC Merced or what we're doing currently to address these changes, we do have the doyourpart.ucmerced.edu website, which provides updates about our campus and COVID-19. So if you have any questions, definitely visit the doyourpart.ucmerced.edu website for these COVID-19 updates regarding UC Merced. All right, and then here's our contact information. So for transfer students and transfers, you're more than welcome to reach out to us at transfer@ucmerced.edu. We have our address listed here, as well as our admissions website and our Meet Our Staff page. So if you're wondering, who you can reach out to, you can definitely check out our website, or if you want to speak to someone, you can give us a call as well. We're also active on our social media pages as well. So we have Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And you'll see here we have 2 different accounts. So we do have the Office of Admissions account, and then we do have our Transfer Initiative Program account too. So our Transfer Initiative Program is consists of our transfer advisors who work closely with different community college and transfer students to ensure that students can transfer from community college to UC. So we have both our admissions and our Transfer Initiative program usernames and accounts listed here for our social media page. All right, so looks like we have some time for questions. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them.
Sheila, it does look like there was one question from Sandy in the chat. For TAG, would it be an issue if a student takes a year break prior to starting at UC Merced, only in the last attendance being community college?
Yeah, so we understand. So we know that for our TAG requirements, there's that requirement that lists that the student must be a full-time community college. We do take each individual's situation into consideration. So if this student has completed all TAG requirements, so minimum requirements, TAG requirements, they're ready to just submit their TAG, but they decide to take a break, they can still apply for the TAG, and we will still review their TAG application. So with the full-time status, we understand that Sometimes students, are bound to things like, they only need one course or they have to pay extra for courses. So if this student is meeting those tag requirements, but is unable to be enrolled full-time, that's fine. They can still submit their tag.
And then Sandy also asked for the TAU or the transfer admissions update. Can students still go in and update their grades for 2021 intersession? And when does the TAU close?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sandy. So the TAU is actually still open. So I know there was that January 31 deadline. That is actually the TAU priority deadline. What that priority deadline means is that, for students who get their TAU by the priority deadline, it actually allows us to move quicker with their applications. So we've already started our application review cycle. So for students who are able to get their TAU in by that priority deadline, we're actually able to move on with our entire full complete review of the student's application. However, the deadline for the TAU is in March, so the students do have until March to submit their TAU. So yes, they can actually still log back into their application to submit a TAU to report any winter intersession, fall, or fall grades, or make any changes to their spring schedule. So for students who have a change in their schedule, they can actually still go back to report grades or make those changes through the TAU on their application. It'll close in March.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheila. Josh has asked, we spoke about breaks in education, but how do we evaluate students who might have taken a few part-time semesters, assuming that they've fulfilled their unit and their prerequisite requirements?
Yeah, so for students who, we try our best. It's kind of like investigative work, right? When we are looking at these applications and making sure everything matches, or, everything, there's nothing that really stands out as like, oh, like this might be like a discrepancy or something that's missing. So we do take a look at a student's application. If we notice that there are multiple gaps, like many gaps, we will actually send a student an email communication. So if we notice that from, let's say, like from 2016 to 2018, the student had, a really long gap, and all they put was, I was working. When the reasons for the gaps are very vague or they're repetitive, we actually send an email out to the student, and we ask the student, you indicated that you took a gap between this time and this time. Can you confirm if you were enrolled or not enrolled in any institutions, and did you complete any courses? So for students with, multiple gaps, we do ask them to, confirm an email. For students who are part-time semesters as well, it's the same case, right? So if a student is only reporting one course and then they don't report another course and they report one course, sometimes for us, if we notice that there's a pattern, we will ask for more information, because it's not too clear. And this is also the case too with students who have a long academic history with more than two community colleges. So some of the applications we see is that a student has a long academic history and they're switching between 3 to 4 community college in different semesters. So even with that, we ask for additional information as well, or we request for an unofficial transcript, just to make sure that we're capturing the academic history for that student. So hopefully I answered it a little bit. But yeah, for students who have gaps, regardless if it's a full-time student or a part-time student, if we're not sure about their academic history, we always send a communication just to confirm that the student wasn't enrolled anywhere. Sometimes we'll also catch it too when we're looking at applications, because what we'll get is there's a part in the application where it asks for the student to kind of list the UC transferable English courses or the UC math course. And sometimes when we're looking at the application, we'll see that the student puts that they did complete the UC transferable math, but it's not listed on their application. So when we do request for that information, we then find that this student actually completed the math and a lot of other courses from a different community college. So we do look at the application thoroughly for, you know, any weird patterns that we might be seeing, any you know, repetitive gaps or big gaps in education. So regardless of the part-time status or full-time status, if we notice that these gaps are, you know, in different places or it's been a really long period, we will ask the student to confirm if they were enrolled or if they were not enrolled. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheila. And we have a follow-up question from Sandy, and we are about out of time. So going back to the transfer admissions update, if they submitted their TAU later on and missed the submission in January, they would still be in compliance with the priority, wouldn't they?
Yeah, so yeah, if the student updates their TAU, you know, there's no problem with updating the TAU. What actually happens is when the student, even if we complete the review, right, for this student's application, when a student submits a new TAU, or, you know, they find that they added another course and they wanted to put that course back onto, or they want to report that, what happens is that that application actually gets moved into a different, we call it queues. So it's basically like a different folder. And that folder is going to list that, it's going to be listed as new AUs submitted. So for students who already submitted a TAU, but now submits a new TAU, that application will actually be moved into new TAU submitted. So even if we've already reviewed that student's application, it's going to go into this folder that notifies us that a new TAU was submitted. So if the TAU is different from what was reported, we just, you know, make those changes or review with those changes with the new TAU. So yeah, if they submit a new TAU, that's okay, as long as they reach the priority, I mean, the deadline for the TAU. And one thing too is after the TAU deadline, if there are, you know, any changes in coursework or any updates that need to be made, the students can actually log on to their UC portals. So in this case, the Connect portal to make those changes in the My Course updates. Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you, Sheila. And with that, we are out of time. Want to take a moment to thank everyone for spending their lunch hour with us today. If you did miss any portion of this presentation, it will be posted online to our website within about 3 to 5 working days. Feel free to share that with your colleagues as well. We do have many more events planned throughout the months of February and March, geared specifically for educators. They happen every Tuesday and Thursday from 12 to 1. You can find out more about that on our admissions.ucmerced.edu. Please do not hesitate to get in touch with us if we can answer any questions that you have. All of our contact information is right there. And on behalf of everyone here at the UC Merced Office of Admissions, thank you again for attending today, and we will see you on the next webinar.